Eyes filled with kindness and a heart filled with love. Patience which is given by the Lord up above. She gave her life that our young might learn to live in a world filled with ignorance and greed. So I wanted to share a thought with you this morning. A friend of mine once told me, you better be careful when you pray for patience because God might put you in a position where you really need it. Well, we chuckle at that somewhat, but we understand what it means. We've got to admit it. Wanting patience and needing patience are two entirely different things. The photo that you saw at the beginning of the video came from a time in ministry for me when things were very, very stressful. It was a stressful time coming from a lot of different directions. And one day I walked out to the back door and I looked and saw the blue heron that was in the photograph making his way down to the lake. And he went down to the lake and stopped just in the edge of the lake and then stood perfectly still. He was completely motionless. He didn't move a muscle. And the lake was still, so you were able to see his reflection in the water. And I went and got my camera and sneaked a quick picture of him standing there in the lake, amazed at his patience and thinking that's something I was a little short on in those days. And then I decided I wanted to get just a little closer. And as I inched closer to the heron, all of a sudden he took off and flew. So that he could escape the danger that he thought I was to him at the time. It's pretty remarkable, isn't it? Times such as these that we're in right now prove to us that, without a doubt, human beings just don't have the kind of patience that blue herons have. We're ready for this time to be over. Unfortunately, I'm afraid that we're just getting started with it in some ways. But we still want patience, don't we? In the 10th chapter of Mark, James and John went to Jesus and they said to Jesus, grant to us a favor. And when Jesus asked them what the favor was, they said, let one of us sit on your left and one of us sit on your right. Now, obviously, they didn't know what they were asking. And Jesus responded, he who wishes to be great among you shall be a servant. And then we get to verse 45. And in verse 45, Jesus says this, for even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many. It's true, we are not gifted with unlimited patience, but that's not to say that we do not have the gift of patience. Psalm 27 says, I believe that I shall look upon the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Wait for the Lord. Be strong. Let your heart take courage. Wait for the Lord. Then I've always loved Proverbs 3. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him and he will make straight your paths. Perhaps we are a bit like the disciples in that we often displace our focus. You see, we're not waiting for the ending of COVID-19. We may think we are. But we who follow Christ are waiting for the deliverance of God. In the words of Micah chapter 7, verse 7, "But as for me, I will look to the Lord. I will wait for the God of my salvation. My God will hear me." Let me ask you a question today. Who is God calling you to serve? If the greatest in the kingdom is one who is a servant, who is God calling you to serve? In this season of waiting, who is the person that you can serve? Granted, the challenges of the present time require thinking differently than we used to. However, just because the world has changed in these days doesn't mean that we simply sit in a state of boredom, overcome by our lack of patience. For those who live by themselves, a phone call would be a tremendous blessing. For those who are infirmed and can't get away from their home, contacting them would be a great way to bless them and to give them a wonderful gift. You see, although we are separate from one another, we are still the body of Christ. We're still the body of Christ, and we still have the mission to care for one another. You've been writing your letters, you've been reading the Gospel of Mark, you've been making your phone calls, praying for one another. These are all ways that we can wait upon the Lord and avoid the monotony of impatience. This week, I want to ask you to consider something. Consider making a list of all the people in your life who would be blessed by a phone call. Maybe an email, maybe a text. Simply to find out if they're all right or if they need anything. In a very literal way, this is the church being the church. I am so grateful for all that you do and for the willingness that you've demonstrated to embrace these ideas through the season of Lent. You're definitely a wonderful community of faith. And I thank you for everything that you do. And so as we embark upon this coming week, we've now sort of turned the corner as we are now moving closer to Holy Week and to Easter. I leave you with these words from Isaiah chapter 40. And these are great words. "But those who wait upon the Lord will renew their strength. They shall mount up on wings like eagles. They shall run and not grow weary. They shall walk and not faint." God bless you, Seaside, as we wait upon the Lord.